AJ Hinch is back as a manager in Major League Baseball, hired officially by the Tigers to lead their team into the future. I'm sure a lot of you remember that AJ and I have a little bit of a history together from his time in Houston. But for anyone who's been living under a rock, I'm going to play an interview right now and catch you up to speed.
You know, honestly, I roll my eyes at it, but I do think probably people need to sweep their own front porch and deal with their own situations, or more than throw allegations around that are unfounded. So I don't know if it's a personal vendetta or if he's got a problem with things. I know, sometimes Twitter considers itself the police of the world, but in this situation, it's time to get to baseball. We'll have to deal with it again when he comes next week, because he's decided to make himself front center on dealing with baseball curiosities. But our guys are pretty good. They don't need to be thrown under the bus like that.
AJ, of course, was the manager of the Houston Astros during the time that they cheated. They were banging on trash cans and code breaking and dark arts and all the different things that we're all well aware of. So I'm sure it will surprise many of you to know that I am in full support of the Tigers hiring AJ Hinch. Why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. First and foremost, AJ has served his time. Regardless of how you feel about the suspension and if it was long enough, if it should have been more, if it should have been less, if you are an Astros fan and say that all other teams are cheating, if you're all other teams and you say, no, just the Astros are cheating and they should all be banned, and whatever you feel like, what ended up happening, the actual facts are, AJ was suspended for a year. He was not banned from baseball. He was given the opportunity to serve a suspension and come back and rehabilitate, his image and also manage in the big leagues. Now, that's exactly what's happened. He served a suspension, and by all accounts, of the people involved, AJ was the most apologetic. He was the most forthcoming. He spoke candidly about the things that he could speak candidly about, in my opinion. I'm sure there are things he could not speak about, and he did not touch those, but he seemed to take responsibility for his part in it, whatever his part may or may not have been. He served his time, and now he's back. And I'm a believer that people should be given a second chance in life. I think people can realize the mistakes of their past, the errors of their ways, so to speak, and come back and be better for it. It's an opportunity that I'm fortunate to have been afforded many times in my life. I'm sure it's an opportunity many of you have been fortunate to be afforded in your lifetimes. And I think it's an opportunity we should afford people more often, so long as they seem to be interested in changing and making improvement. Now, with all of that out of the way, because that's really not what I wanted to focus on here. What I wanted to focus on here is, can AJ Hinch help the Tigers? And how's that going to go? How's it going to be perceived? Now, if you'll remember, AJ Hinch took over as manager of the Astros as they were coming out of a rebuild. He was part of some bad teams, and he was part of some really good teams. And I think that the Tigers are in a similar position right now. I think the Tigers have a lot of good young talent. They can hit. They got a lot of good young pitching. They're a talented team, no doubt. And they started off the season hot. Now, things happen, and they played some bad baseball here and there, and didn't finish off too well. However, they do have a lot of talent over there. Nico Goodrum is someone that has taken me deep multiple times. Casey Mize, Michael Fulmer. They've got Spencer Turnbull. So they got some arms. They got guys in the pen that throw hard and are very good at times. So they have some pieces there. I know the Tigers fan base has been a little bit underserved the last couple years with their teams, but I do think AJ Hinch is a good person to come in and kind of round good young talent into a competitive big league team. He's done it before, and I think he'll do it again. Now, do you believe that AJ Hinch is fully in on the analytics ways of the Astros, how they were doing things, or is he more old school? I don't know that answer. I've only met AJ one time. However, I think he has enough experience on the baseball side of things, and also with a front office that goes in the analytical direction, where he can see the merit of both. And I think that's very important in today's baseball. I think some people go fully analytics. I think we saw that with the Rays. The Rays are very in on that. Very little, seemingly very little feel for the game, very little room for interpretation. And that's not a knock on them. This is just how they've chosen to run their team. And then we see teams that are very much field-based and kind of push analytics to the side. I think, at least publicly, the Marlins have been one of those teams where they said, we're going to go old school with scouting and looking at players and knowing the game and all that, and they made the playoffs this year as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. My personal leaning is that being familiar with both the analytics side and the baseball side is important and the best route forward. You can kind of blend the benefits of both. Do I think AJ can do that? I do. I think he has enough experience on both sides that he can bring that to the table. Like I said, I mentioned that I had met AJ one time. I was 2018 All-Star. I met him at the All-Star game as he was the manager. That was after the tweets that I kind of showed earlier, I guess the spin rate, the beginning of the spin rate discussion. And after his quotes about me in the media and on the video, and he was pleasant to me. He pulled me aside. He said he wanted me to feel like I deserved to be there, and that he was going to try to work me in certain ways. We talked about the logistics of how that might happen. Now, it didn't happen. I didn't end up pitching in the game, but he was professional enough to pull me aside. He very easily could have just ignored me like many of the other Astros players. Actually, in fact, all of the Astros players did during the All-Star game. Even when I would say hi to them or whatever, they refused to speak to me. AJ was the one that came over and actually spoke to me. So that's about all my thoughts on that. It'll be interesting to see how the Tigers rebuild continues and how they go on to perform in the coming years. But I am happy to see AJ Hinch back in a managerial position. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Alex Cora. There's been some rumblings about him getting hired again after his suspension has now been served as well. Although I don't know all the kind of underlying currents of that one as well, as I'm familiar with the AJ situation. But it'll be interesting to see how those things play out. But for now, AJ Hinch is back as the manager of the Detroit Tigers, and I'm happy for him. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next video. I know it's been a while since I posted one, but I'm back, and I'll be posting much more frequently. See you guys in the next one.